Actuators are components that convert fluid power into mechanical power. Brake systems typically incorporate single-acting cylinders which exhibit linear movement. Now, if you've been only passively listening to this lecture, this is the point in time I need you to tune in at full intensity for an important announcement that might just save your life. There are two types of single-acting cylinders, and you must be able to differentiate between the two because they behave fundamentally different from each other and can have catastrophic consequences if you mix them up. This is a spring-extended, hydraulically retracted single-acting cylinder with a port on the rod end and a spring in the cap. When the rod end is dumped to low pressure, the spring in the cap passively extends the rod. When high pressure flow enters the rod end, the cylinder retracts the rod. One might employ a spring-extended, hydraulically retracted single-acting cylinder in something called a fail-safe brake, because any inadvertent loss of pressure would extend the cylinder and apply the brake. This is in contrast to a hydraulically extended, spring-retracted single-acting cylinder with a port on the cap end and a spring on the rod. When the cap end is dumped to low-pressure tank, the spring in the rod passively retracts the rod. When high pressure flow enters the cap end, the cylinder extends the rod and applies the brake. I need you to compare and contrast the differing behavior of these two types of single-acting cylinders. In the deactivated, low-pressure state, one is extended and the brake is applied, while the other is retracted and the brake is removed. In contrast, when subject to pressurized flow, one retracts and removes the brake, while the other extends and applies the brake. Pause the lecture and stare at this diagram without blinking until you can understand the differences exhibited by these two different styles of single-acting cylinders and their response to the loss and application of pressure, because it will be on the test, and one day it may save your life. I am not joking about this. Moving on. Brake cylinders, regardless of type, are housed in a device known as a caliper. When applied, the caliper grips a braking surface like a disc affixed to a rotating shaft, or in the case of the yaw brakes, a lip extending from the yaw ring such that it applies a counter torque to slow, stop, and or hold the braking surface in place. The rod tip of the cylinder inside the caliper does not ordinarily make direct contact with the braking surface, but rather pushes brake pads, formed of a sacrificial high-friction surface which makes direct connection to the braking surface. The pads themselves are consumable items, and low-level maintenance on braking systems often calls for the inspection or replacement of the pads. Two types of brake mounting systems exist: floating calipers and fixed calipers. A floating caliper design uses one braking cylinder, and the caliper housing moves axially with respect to the braking surface. When retracted, the brake pad and the rod is lifted from the braking surface, and the caliper and brake pad attached on the opposite side can move axially, i.e. float back and forth. When the cylinder inside a floating caliper extends, the brake pad on the rod is pressed to the braking surface, and the caliper and brake pad attached to the opposite side slides, i.e. floats, such that both brake pads grip the braking surface. A fixed caliper design, in contrast, uses two braking cylinders connected in parallel, one on each side, and is fixed, hence the name axially with respect to the braking surface. When retracted, the brake pads and both rods are lifted from the braking surface. In the release state, a fixed caliper design does not move axially, i.e. it does not float, because it's fixed. When the cylinders inside a fixed caliper extend, the brake pads on both sides are pressed to the braking surfaces from opposite sides. Now keep in mind the choice of caliper, fixed or floating, does not influence the choice of the cylinder housed within. Either mounting method could easily accommodate a spring-extended, hydraulically retracted single-acting cylinder just as easily as it could its evil twin, a hydraulically extended, spring-retracted single-acting cylinder. Just to keep you on your toes, I'll make use of both types of calipers and both types of cylinders in the upcoming illustrated example. Moving on. In addition to pumps, valves, and actuators, other accessory components round out a larger hydraulic system. Switches are digital devices that can exist in one of two mutually exclusive states: deactivated or activated. For example, consider a normally open pressure switch that, when subjected to pressures below the set value of, let's say, 1000 psi, sends a 0-volt signal to the control system. When pressure rises above the set value of 1000 psi or above, the normally open switch closes and sends a 24-volt signal to the control system. When pressure falls below the reset value, the pressure switch would reopen and send 0 volts. In this capacity, a pressure switch offers a clear and defined transition from one state to another. A sensor or transducer, in contrast, measures something and outputs a voltage or current signal proportional to the measured quantity. Consider a 0 to 10 volt pressure sensor capable of measuring 0 to 1000 psi. A 500 psi input, the pressure sensor would output 5 volts. At 750 psi, the pressure sensor would output 7.5 volts, and so on. These analog signals can be used by the control system to perform certain actions at certain input conditions and display or record those values. A dizzying range of electromechanical switches and sensors exist that respond to pressure, temperature, proximity, level, flow rate, and more. Lastly, since brakes are critical safety systems, they often incorporate emergency backup devices like accumulators and hand pumps. An accumulator is a hydraulic energy storage device we examine extensively in the accumulators lecture, available at the Big Bad Tech channel. In ordinary operation, the hydraulic power unit provides pressurized flow to the brake system through the pump. If, however, the HPU fails, the quantity of pressurized oil stored inside the accumulator can be used to apply or release the brakes in the event of power loss or pump failure. Since the quantity of pressurized fluid stored in the accumulator is sufficient to allow the orderly shutdown of a system, but not infinite, brake systems often incorporate a hand pump, which allows the technician the ability to repressurize the system should both the HPU be disabled and the accumulator depleted. When the hand pump piston is displaced upwards, oil in the reservoir is pulled through the intake check valve and the outlet check valve remains closed. When the hand pump piston is displaced downwards, oil is pushed through the outlet check valve into the system and the inlet check valve remains closed. Let's now take a look at a simplified representation of a hydraulic yaw and rotor brake. As with identifying a smaller system inside a larger schematic, there's a couple stages I like to use when it comes time to determine how the subsystem, once identified, actually works. Before we dive into the operational theory, it's a recommended practice to first identify as many individual components as you can and recognize the pressure and tank lines. If you're up to the task, by all means, pause the lecture and see if you can identify each component in the system and determine the pressure and tank lines. Again, do not initially concern yourself with what each component does. Just identify as many components as you can and identify which lines are pressure and tank. By the way, pressure is red and tank is blue. Maybe go rob your little brother's crayon box before you get to work. Yes, I know this initial image is a little cramped, but don't worry. We'll zoom in on specific elements when we start discussing operational theory. If you're tracking, here's what you should have found. Working generally from the bottom to top, left to right, looks like we got an HPU consisting of a motor-driven pump, a reservoir, a main pressure relief valve, and a couple filters. Even though there's a bunch of reservoir symbols, remember there's only one reservoir. Next up, we got a normally closed solenoid operated valve labeled Sol F. It appears to be associated with one of the filters in the HPU. Next level up, we got check valve 1 oriented such that it allows flow from bottom to top and blocks flow top to bottom. On the upstream side of check valve 1, we got a pressure switch called PSP. Next level up, we got another check valve 2, oriented to block flow left to right and allow flow right to left in series with a hand pump and another pressure relief valve called auxiliary pressure relief valve going back to tank. Next level up, we got an accumulator and a manually operated, normally closed valve labeled dump in series with a little flow restrictor. Next level up, we got a pair of hydraulically extended, spring-retracted cylinders labeled yaw brake connected in parallel. This is undoubtedly yaw brake and is most likely a fixed caliper system since it's using 2 cylinders. There appears to be a pressure switch on the cap ends of the yaw brake cylinders called PSY. There are 2 directional control valves at this level. The upstream one is a normally open solenoid-operated valve labeled Sol 1. The downstream one is a normally closed solenoid-operated valve labeled Sol 2. At the top, we got a spring-extended hydraulic or retracted single-acting cylinder labeled rotor brake. This is undoubtedly the rotor brake, and it's most likely a floating caliper system since it's using one brake cylinder. There appears to be a pressure switch PSR on the business end of the rotor brake, and there's a bunch of valves for this system. The first one upstream is a normally closed solenoid-operated valve labeled Sol 3. The one directly opposite of it is a normally open solenoid-operated valve labeled Sol 4. Just below it is a series connection of two valves. The upstream one is a normally closed solenoid-operated valve labeled Sol 5, and it appears to be feeding a pressure relief valve called PRV-R. You know, all the solenoid-operated valves governing the rotor and yaw brakes, and this guy at the bottom have manual overrides on them in the event a technician needs to force a particular position if the control system fails to do so. Lastly, here's the pressure line in red emanating from the pump. Initially, flow does not pass through the pressure relief valve, nor the closed Sol F valve. It does pass through check valve 1. Check valve 2 in front of the hand pump blocks flow, as does the closed dump valve. Flow does pass through the open Sol 1 valve and is blocked by the closed Sol 2 valve. Finally, flow is blocked by the closed Sol 3 valve. Lastly, here's the return line in blue. The open Sol 4 valve drains flow to the reservoir through the filter on the right-hand side. Most likely, this is the return line filter. So with regard to the pressure switches, it looks like PSP is measuring system pressure, and by extension, accumulator pressure. PSY is probably measuring pressure at the yaw brake, and PSR is probably measuring pressure at the rotor brake. I'm betting that this system uses these pressure inputs to tell if a particular brake is released or applied. These could also be configured as pressure sensors, which output a voltage or current signal proportional to pressure. All right, before we take a look at this system and works in detail, we need to determine the start state. Given we've identified the pressure and return lines and the deactivated position of the valves governing its behavior, how do the yaw and rotor brakes respond when we turn on the pump? You know what? The yaw brake uses hydraulically extended spring-retracted single-acting cylinders. You will additionally note the rotor brake uses a spring-extended hydraulically retracted single-acting cylinder. By all means, pause the lecture, take a look at the schematic, and determine how this system responds. If you're tracking, you should realize that once the pump starts, the system applies both the yaw and rotor brakes. This goes back to my earlier arbitrary decision to illustrate the system as a lock-it-in-place variety. When the control system or technician isn't actuating any valve, the pump pressurizes the system and applies the yaw brakes hydraulically through open Sol 1, whereas the rotor brake is spring-applied, and when the rod end is dumped to tank through open Sol 4, i.e. it's locked in place. Only when commanded to do so by the system, as we'll soon illustrate, does the turbine remove the brakes and let it spin. Illustrating the operation of a hydraulic system at use can at times be problematic, because when a single valve shifts, several things can happen at once. For this reason, I'll illustrate an action with the previous state on the left and the present state on the right, as I've done here. If there's follow-on actions from that present state, that'll become the previous state and so on, and so we can move from next state to next to next. Ideally, you should be able to witness and understand a definite sequence of operations. So rather than tackling this whole schematic at once, let's simplify our task and analyze just the yaw brakes first. We'll examine the rotor brakes later on. We'll additionally further simplify this diagram by ignoring certain paths, at least initially. For now, pretend Sol F, the hand pump, and the dump valve are simply closed paths that don't exist. We'll look at these systems when we discuss backup operation and supplemental features later on. Let's start this analysis presuming the nacelle is pointed in the right direction and we want it to stay where it's at. Once we go through this scenario, we'll take a look at what happens when the wind shifts and we need to move. As we earlier identified, when the pump is energized, pressurized flow enters both the cap ends of the hydraulically extended, spring-retracted single-acting cylinders connected in parallel, such that both cylinders simultaneously extend and apply the brakes. For obvious reasons, I'm going to call this scenario with both Sol 1 and Sol 2 in the de-energized state, i.e. Sol 1 open and Sol 2 closed, apply yaw brakes. This being said, once the yaw brake has been applied and the cylinders reach limits of travel and the accumulator filled, pressure keeps rising and rising and rising. Eventually, the main pressure relief valve will open up and allow a path back to tank. For the purposes of argument, let's say the main pressure relief valve opens at 1000 psi. In this scenario, with Sol 1 open and Sol 2 closed and both yaw brake cylinders at the limits of extension, pressure switch PSP on the pressure line and pressure switch PSY on the yaw brakes would both be at the maximum system pressure, in this case 1000 psi. When pressure switch PSY changes states, the control system recognizes the yaw brake's got a good grip. Although effective, this isn't a scenario you want to maintain for any length of time, since once the nacelle has been parked in place, properly oriented into the wind, as we're presuming in this example, it might stay there for a while. For this reason, the control system might issue a command to Sol 1. Sol 1 energizes and Sol 1 shifts to the closed position. Both Sol 1 and Sol 2 are closed and there is no path back to tank, and pressure in the cap ends of the yaw brake cylinders remains at 1000 psi and the brake remains applied. In this scenario, the control system can take the extra step and tell the pump to give it a rest, buddy, and turn off the pump. I'm going to call this scenario with Sol 1 energized and Sol 2 de-energized, i.e. both Sol 1 and Sol 2 closed, and the pump off, pressurized standby. Note, check valve 1, check valve 2, and the closed dump valve allow the accumulator to remain system pressure without the pump, which if you recall is taking a rest. You note if the system over time ever detected a loss of pressure at PSY, indicative of the yaw brake losing its grip, it could briefly toggle back and forth between apply and pressurized standby to refresh pressure at the yaw brake, either from the stored hydraulic energy in the accumulator or briefly energized pump. Now that we've got an idea of how the system applies the yaw brake, enters pressurized standby, and maintains its grip strength, let's discuss how to remove it. Let's say the wind shifts and the turbine needs to yaw the nacelle. Before energizing the yaw motors, it needs to remove the yaw brakes. From pressurized standby, with Sol 1 energized and shifted to the closed state, the control system then energizes Sol 2. Sol 2 shifts to the open position and dumps the pressure stored in the yaw brake cylinders cap ends to tank. The spring retracted cylinders retract and release their grip on the yaw ring. For obvious reasons, I'm calling this yaw release. You'll note to release the yaw brakes does not necessitate the pump. Yaw motors can then be energized and the nacelle turned to face the wind. Once the nacelle arrives at the destination, the yaw brake again needs to be applied. From the yaw brake release state, the system de-energizes Sol 2, and Sol 2 returns to the closed position. If you think about it, this is kind of similar to the earlier pressurized standby state, only this time there's no pressure in the yaw cylinders and the brakes are released. I'm going to call this brief transitional state depressurized standby. From depressurized standby, almost immediately the system de-energizes Sol 1, which reopens, and pressurized flow enters either from the accumulator or a freshly started pump. As at the beginning, yaw brake cylinders simultaneously extend and apply the brakes. In summary, by coordinating the sequenced opening and closure of Sol 1 and Sol 2, and monitoring the status of pressure switches PSY and PSP, the system manages when to apply, when to enter standby, when to refresh, and when to release the yaw brake. You note a more industrial scale system, rather than using a single brake as I've illustrated here, might be using more than one yaw brake connected in parallel, driven by the same valve set, or several yaw brakes driven by their own independent valve sets actuated simultaneously. Long story short, more brakes means more holding power, which if you remember correctly, was the original intent of hydraulic system.